Hello, good start. Good job. This is live. Hello, welcome to Forest Focus. We all know Nottingham Forest love a transfer, but how many actually needed this summer? Could it be more than we think? Joining me to go through our squad in detail and help us decide is, first of all, Pete Blackburn. Pete, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. Slightly worried if any words are going to come out after that start. Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Well, better than I sounded at the start. Yeah. Happy birthday. Was it your birthday yesterday?
It was Friday.
Friday. Oh, I'll retract that then. That was too long ago. Right, let's move on. Second guest today is Mikey Clarke. Mikey, how you doing?
Yeah, good. I enjoyed the good weather this weekend. Hopefully that's a change for the better and things are going to improve. So yeah, I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good. Well, not too bad at all. And third guest is Greg Mitchell. Greg, you're like you're about to laugh. How are you doing?
It's a shambles, isn't it? What a start. Get a grip, man.
It's always a shambles. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed at all. Right,
good.
like I say, good. Like I say, we'll go through the squad position by position, help us decide how many players we actually need. I've gone through it and it's maybe more than we think. I don't know. See what other people think. Keep it interactive and do join in and have your say as we go along. Before we start, though, should say best wishes and get well soon to Kevin Campbell, former Forest striker. Sounds like he's in a terrible way in hospital with kidney failure. So thoughts with him and his family. I don't know him, but everyone says he's a really good guy, really nice guy, good family man. So very much thinking of him. And second as well, it's not Forest related, but the death of Rob Burrow yesterday, a proper hero in every sense of the word after his death from MND. I covered it a bit. I didn't really know how awful it was. And so I did some stories for it when I was working at the Post through Stuart Broad and his family because his mother died of it, I think. Obviously, Greg, it's kind of touched you in a sense that one of your best mates, Sam Perkins, who we all know, has had it for quite a while as well. So is there anything you want to add at all?
Well, I mean, yeah. The sad thing about MND is you always know this day's coming. It just broke me last night. Him and Sam were diagnosed at a very similar time. They're a similar age, similar outlook on life. The way they both absolutely got this awful diagnosis and just went for it with every single part of them. And he's just an incredible person. The amount of money Rob has managed to raise for the fight against MND. It really hit home last night, just how devastating and tragic this illness is. And that we've got to find a cure. We have. And like Sam says, you know, he doesn't believe there isn't a cure for this disease. It just hasn't been found yet. So for me, it's kind of focused me a little bit more to do as much as I can for Sam's charity Stand Against MND, and just what an incredible person Rob was and what an incredible person Sam is. And I'm thinking of him and his family as well as Rob's today, because of course it'll touch them, and just really sad. Just a real sad time for the sporting world as well, but incredible to see how they've all come together and the outpouring of love for Rob, because he was just clearly an incredible guy.
Is that a Stand Against MND shirt you're wearing today?
Yes, this is the One More Marathon shirt. Sam's done about 3 now. It's never one more marathon. There's always something else around the corner, and I'm sure there's something being planned as we speak. But yeah, this is one of the many things he's done.
Did you do it?
Not the marathon.
I knew the answer to that very rhetorical question.
Right, okay. I'm going to do something big this summer, put it that way.
Good man.
Surprise you all.
Let's get into the football chat then. Like I said, we're going to go through the squad position by position and see how we're set up. I have done a typically basic and terrible graphic to show what we roughly have at the moment. There's a couple of names missing off here, like Oral Mangala. Haven't put on, and O'Brien and people like that, and Wang Ijo. I'll just go through roughly what we've got for those who are listening, and then we'll get into it position by position. So obviously in goal, we've got Sales, Turner and Vlachodimos after Hennessy left. And then defence of Williams, Richards, Aina and Toffolo are our fullbacks. Central defenders, Murillo, Bolly, Niakate, Omobamidele and Joe Worrell, with Scott McKenna basically no longer our player really. He was a part of the end of his contract. Midfield of Danilo, Yates, Sangare and Dominguez. No Mangala on there as it stands, as I say. Wingers, Hudson-Odoi and Elanga. And then I've put in Dennis and Josh Bowler as the backup. And then Gibbs White, I've got Aguilera as his backup, so you can see where we might need some business doing. And then Wood and Awoniyi as our current strikers. So we'll start with keepers. I don't know, Pete, if you heard on Friday, me and Mark went through keepers in quite a lot of detail. Mark had some interesting stats on Matt Sells. Even though we agree he should start as number one, probably, his save percentage was it the joint lowest or second lowest out of keepers who were regular starters in the Premier League. So on that, any concerns about Sells, and would you be happy with Turner or Vlachodimos as number two should one of them stay, which does look unlikely?
Yeah, I heard the chat and I thought it was fascinating, and certainly done in a lot more detail and a lot more clarity than I'm probably going to be able to add today. My instinct on Sells is that what we're seeing doesn't quite match up to the stats. It may be that I'm totally wrong about that. But personally, I've always been pretty confident in him. I felt that he hasn't made any massive howlers. There's obviously been a couple that I identified where he probably could have had more of an impact, saving shots or perhaps being slightly more proactive in the box. But generally speaking, it may be a reaction to where we've come from goalkeeping-wise before him, but I felt like he was a major improvement. I felt like he wasn't going to be a massive risk, which the others obviously had been. And the stats haven't really changed my mind on that. I think we need a much bigger sample size to be confident in those stats. And I think even people in the sort of data community are sort of relatively open about stats being sort of slightly less helpful in some positions than others. I think sometimes both perhaps centre-backs and goalkeepers can be quite difficult. And there's so much context, obviously, in terms of how teams play in the league you're playing in and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, a massive place for it. And if those stats continue, then presumably at some point my eye test is going to need checking, and I'm going wrong there. But as things stand, I'm totally happy with him. I think we'll probably we may well have to recruit there, because you can't see Turner and Vlachodimos being happy with the situation that they're in. To answer your other question, I could cope with Turner being backup personally, on the basis that we're going to have to make choices about what our priorities are this summer. I don't think we're going to be able to strengthen in all the positions that we would ideally like to. If that was the case, then we'd be looking at bringing in probably double figures of players, and I'm not too sure if that's feasible given the financial situation. So goalkeeper wouldn't be at the top of my list. But having said that, I think if they're both going, which they may well do, then clearly we're going to need something in there. And I think the sort of conclusion you guys came to, that we're probably looking at a young up-and-coming talent who has the potential to reach those sorts of heights that Matt Sells has achieved in his career and can challenge him, is the ideal situation. Obviously, that will require good recruitment, because you can't just pick players out of nowhere that have that sort of potential and also are good enough to step in if you need them to in the Premier League. And so hopefully there's work being done there. And given that there's an awful lot of links out and about already with goalkeepers dripping out, then I presume that is an area that they're looking at, and that's the sort of route they're thinking about going down. So I'd support that. I don't think finding a player to be a number one goalkeeper for us at the start of the season is a priority compared to a few other areas, but it's certainly probably going to be somewhere that they're looking at doing work by the looks of things.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I like Sells. I think he's done a really good job. And one of the things that makes it harder to judge goalkeeping stats as well is the amount of goals we concede from set pieces. Some of those are going to be difficult on XG to save and maybe count against him unduly. So I like him. I suppose, Greg, it's a really difficult position to recruit, number one, number two keeper, because you don't want the gap to be too big, like we had with Hennessy. But then it's hard to find someone who's willing to sit on the bench and be kind of good enough. Like you have Palace with Johnston and Henderson, and one of those is always going to move. So what kind of keeper would you want us to bring in realistically, assuming you're happy with Sells as number one?
Yeah, I think it's as hard as a striker to recruit a keeper. They're the two most difficult positions. Stats don't always work, and that's another reason XG doesn't work.
I knew. I was glad you got you and Mikey on as the antithesis of Mark for this section.
Yeah, I mean, he's only up for save of the season. The poor bloke's had cross after cross and shot after shot. We're not a very good side, so he's going to be busier than most. I think he's been a vast improvement on what we've got and what we've had previously. There's not many out there that are going to come and want to fight for that number one position. They want to be a solid number one, and you bring a keeper in like that, you're spending Henderson money or Breeze Samba kind of money. They're just not out there. And I think Sells has proven he settled the ship. He made some saves that have kept us in this league. And he's only going to improve, and he'll have a fantastic summer out in Germany at the Euros. And we'll all see that he's probably one of the better number ones. So, you stick with him. And then I like the idea of getting a young keeper in if there's not one in the academy already. And then Turner, obviously, is the number 2.
If he goes, though, Mikey, if Turner goes and Vlachodimos goes, we're probably looking at 2 keepers, someone in the dream job, the best job in football, Scott Carson, who can sit on the bench for, and rake his money in and probably make 0 appearances. And then a younger keeper. I think Neil mentions here that we've been linked with Andrew, a Brazilian keeper who plays for, I'm going to say it's wrong, Gil Vicente in Portugal. And then is it Daniel Peretz? Just let me check. So I've written that in my notes. The Bayern Munich number 3. Yeah, Daniel Peretz, who's an Israeli keeper. Be lying if I've seen anything of him. Are those kind of links that you kind of like the profile of, at least, for the younger number 2 competing with Sells' number 1 spot?
I think so. I concur with what the guys are saying. I can't really add too much to that. I think Matt Sells was a massive upgrade on what we saw in the first half of the season. And I cast my mind back to the Sheffield United game, where at half-time, literally everybody in the away end was saying, without Sells, we'd have lost this. Never mind they've been behind. So he stepped up in big moments. He's been fantastic. I agree with Greg. I think he's going to play a part this summer for Belgium. And I agree with P. I don't think with what we need to do, goalkeeper is something we now need to be worried about. However, there is a thing at Forest where our goalkeepers seem to get injured quite a bit. So you're going to need a bit of backup. And it's a long season and you're going to have cups. So let's just assume Turner and Vlachodimos do go and Hennessy's already gone. You've got a huge gap there. So again, to Pete's point, I think he's spot on. Who's going to want to come and sit on the bench? Well, you're probably going to have somebody that's maybe been released and is happy to be a number 2 or number 3, or a young up-and-coming lad that wants to test himself in the best league in the world. But I don't think it's a position that we need to be spending a lot of money on. We just need to get that profile right. So Sells is going to play 85% of the games this year in the up-and-coming season. And then our second keeper or third keeper may play in the cups or deputise for injury. But like I said, we're going to have a limited amount to spend, I think. And I don't think we need to worry about that position. We spent all of last season, 3/4 of last season, panicking about it. Matt Sells is perfectly good enough for Forest.
Steve mentions in the comments about Vlachodimos on loan to Olympiacos, and Steve also, I read at the time, and I remember reading that he didn't want to go on loan to Olympiacos, and I don't know if he get a game for them now. They've just won a trophy, so they must be fairly well set in that position. Someone else mentioned he's been linked to the move back to Germany. I think he's born in Germany and played for Germany under 21, so maybe that happens. I don't know. Yeah, a couple of people mentioning Stuttgart in the comments, but I think he'll certainly go, and probably Turner. So we need at least 1 keeper. Then we'll come back to that at the end. Moving on to fullbacks, I'll go to Pete, because I'm going to suggest, does Nico Williams need replacing, Pete, or is he the greatest right back in the history of football? And do we need any other fullbacks when we've only got Toffolo, Aina, and Richards? And I'll just tell you how many games Richard played before I let you answer, Pete. He played 15 games last season, and he played 5 90 minutes for Olympiacos on loan and a couple of 70s here and there. So he did get some football, but it's a lot to ask of him. So where are you at on the fullbacks, Pete?
It's lucky that you extended that question, because when you first mentioned, is Nico good enough, there was a sort of boiling hot rage that came up inside me. I was about to issue a 2-word answer that probably would have caused you problems with the algorithm. Nico's definitely good enough. Aina's definitely good enough. Toff's definitely good enough as backup. So we've got 3 there that I think leave us in a pretty good position. Big question marks around Richards. Hasn't played enough football in that spell at Olympiacos for us to be remotely confident that he can come back in and do a job. Clearly, if he could, it'd be great, because he's obviously got some pedigree. He brings, I think, qualities that we could really do in the Premier League, in terms of he brings a real sort of athleticism and a power about him. Looks like a classy player certainly looked like he could really impact games with his left foot when he was playing here, and I saw less of him at Bayern. But the reports seem to be that when he played, he did make a decent impact. So clearly, if he could come back in, I think he would make a big difference. But without wanting to be sort of too judgmental or harsh, I think it seems quite unlikely that a player who has had the injury problems that he has and has also had potentially some fallings out with the hierarchy, given the way it all played out, is going to come back in at Forest and have an impact this season. I hope that's wrong. I really do. It'd be brilliant and would solve a problem for us very easily and very cheaply if he can. So fingers crossed his recovery and his rehabilitation is all going really well. And he comes back in pre-season in a good state. But as things are, I'm sort of assuming we probably need to do business on one fullback if we keep the ones that we've currently got. I'd probably, I think, be looking to bring in a left back that can really impact games in the first team. I think Aina and Nico are definitely good enough to be starting fullbacks for us, but I think we probably need one to push both of those two. Obviously, we know that both of them can play on both sides. Aina particularly strong at playing off the left, so we have got some really nice inbuilt flexibility there. But I think I'd be looking to bring in a sort of relatively young but very promising left back, if at all possible, if those sorts of players are out there. Probably not somebody on massive money who's already done it at this level, though, but someone with genuine sort of pedigree and high potential would be really nice. So that's what I'd be looking at. But I think it's a position that we're quite well stocked in already, because there's two players there that I'm very confident starting Premier League games for us, and also Toff doesn't tend to let us down, and I'm perfectly happy with him being there at backup as well.
We went with the loan route, Mikey, I guess, this season with Montiel. I think we might have to do that again because we haven't got a ton of money, and we'll probably come into the area of the team where we do need to spend. It's kind of a tricky one, isn't it? Because Montiel was brought in as a starter and he failed, but then the year before, Lodi was a big success. Do you think a loan move sensible, or do we need to really invest in, dare I say, an upgrade on Nico or Aina to really piss Pete off?
No, yeah, no. Again, I think Pete's view kind of concurs with mine. I think left back is probably where we need to strengthen. I think if people cast their mind back in recent seasons, we've always had 3, 4, sometimes 5 strong loanees that have been within our squad, and a lot of them have been fullbacks. A couple this season, obviously Lodi, the season prior, started a little bit slow, but then really showed his quality towards the end of last season, end of the season prior. Sorry. So I'd be really happy starting with Aina and Williams, absolutely. But I do think that if we want to start really pushing up the table, I think Aina is probably better on the right hand side, and therefore he challenges Williams for one spot. But to enable that to happen, you're going to have to bring in a left back of significant quality that can play the vast majority of games with Toffolo as his backup. Sorry, so don't think it's a huge priority for Forest, but I do think that if one becomes available, we should absolutely go in for a left back. And again, a similar profile to what Pete was saying: young, athletic, maybe somebody that can settle quite quick, so maybe has experience at football on these shores. Because obviously, we had Tavares this year, didn't we? We had Montiel. Both of them struggled to some degree, getting a head around what it was all about, and both, or certainly Montiel's played at a very high level. So this league gives you challenges that you just don't find in some countries. So for me, defence, and we all saw the issues that we had in defence this year and last year, getting a very reliable, solid fullback that can play the vast majority of the games on that left-hand side, I think is really key. Whether one exists, who knows? But like I said, I wouldn't be overly concerned if on that first game we had Aina and Williams. And one more thing that you've also got to think, we're thinking about a back four, aren't we? But that profile of this fullback, can they play wing back? Because if Nuno stays, he often goes to a 3, and he might do that more next season. So again, you're going to need the profile of somebody that's athletic, that can get up and down, and can be available for the majority of the games. So it's just something to consider.
Just a couple of names mentioned in the comments. People feel free to drop along names as we go all the way through this. Richard mentions Josh Powell, who's our own academy player, who looked very bright in pre-season, then got a pretty nasty injury. So would we put faith in someone that young and unproven? Gregor mentions Kieran Tierney, who I think spent the season on loan at Sociedad. I think he was in Spain, certainly. And Pete mentions Leif Davies, who I think had 18 assists or something for Ipswich, a very attacking fullback, but I just can't see them been willing to sell so soon after promotion. He's one of their main men. And obviously, Omar Richards is the other one, as Mark mentions as well, who we have already got. Right, before we come on to centre-backs then, which I'll start with for Greg, I'll keep it with Greg, as we have a word for the Nav. Greg is desperate to make a big pitch for Forza Fest. What have you got to say, Greg Mitchell?
It's this Saturday, isn't it? God, it's come round quick. It feels like my life's been taken over by this festival. Cannot wait now. I've told you all about it before, but just buy your tickets. The weather looks like it's going to be great. There's a good group of people already there. We've sold quite a few, so we're happy about that. But there are still tickets available. It starts at 2. The live music starts at 2:15, and the curfew's at 10. But I just can't wait now. It's going to be that nice release from the football with a lot of familiar faces. So just buy your tickets. It's going to be good.
Did you go to London at the weekend for the Champions League final?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to Wembley. Went outside Wembley, watched that documentary and thought you could just walk in, but it wasn't the case. Yeah, it was great. Ended up watching it in Hyde Park with about 50,000 Dortmund fans. So they're just incredible. You know, you spend enough time with fans like that and you realise how good they've got it over in Europe. But no, it was a brilliant day. The result didn't ruin it. And just great to see. I know Dortmund are a big side, but great to see the underdogs take it to them and really go for it. Gives you hope as a Forest fan.
Indeed. Did Mrs. Mitchell make it in? I think there was some speculation. Does she in or not?
No.
What a shame.
I'll tell you one thing, though. A guy called Rob Addock, who watches this, he's put some brilliant stuff up online on Instagram. Have a search for his name. He ended up giving his Champions League ticket away, and it's gone viral, the clip. It's quite a good emotional one. So I'll repost that after this.
Oh, well, fair play. Right, let's stay with you, Greg, for our centre halves. So we've got Murillo absolutely nailed, but might go. Ollie, Niakate, Omobamidele, and Worrell. Going through them one by one, are there any that you would let go from the squad? I suppose Joe maybe.
Sadly,
but would you, any of the others?
Do you know what I really struggle with? And I mean, Mikey kind of touched on it just back then about the left backs. We'd be happy with what we've got because you grow to love and like these players and you want to see them play. But to progress, it's such a cutthroat. We've got to have better players in those positions. As much as I love them, some of them anyway, it's like we have to improve if we want to improve, because if we have the same squad as last year, the same thing's going to happen. Worrell's the obvious one to get some money for. I mean, he's a cup winner now. He's done very well on his loan. He's proved he can perform at a very high level in Europe. So it could be his last bit of duty for us to get us a few million. And I'd be very sad to see him go because he's been a brilliant captain, one of our favourite ever, teams getting us promoted like that. But he does seem the obvious one that we'd be able to get some money on. Murillo, obviously, if he stays, then that's a real show of intention from us that we can really try and push up. It interested me with him how there was talk of him going to Arsenal as like a left back. Now, if that's the case, it's usually the top teams that change the course of the way football's played, isn't it? And if they start to get that bigger, heavier fullback, then lots of other teams will start to be doing that as well. So it might change the way everyone starts looking at transfers. So it'll be interesting. But at the minute, for me, it's Murillo and Bolly start. I think they've been the ones that give you that confidence. And we're going to have to recruit. We're just going to have to, especially when we play with 3 at the back. I think it's a real critical position for us to strengthen him for this season.
Yeah, I think Greg makes a good point, Mikey, and this is perhaps where the crux of the argument is. Because in isolation, you say, yeah, definitely keep Murillo, obviously. Keep Bolly. Keep Omobamidele because he's young and promising. Keep Niakate probably because he's solid, or he's been okay as a solid backup. But if we're going to finish higher than 17th, we probably need to sign better, don't we? So we've perhaps got to sell at least one of them.
We do. Honestly, you just hit the nail on the head. But it's also all about availability as well. So Willy Bolly's had his injury problems. If we sell Murillo, Worrell's probably on his way out. Niakate looks great sometimes, but he's kind of here and there. And Omobamidele is a young player just sort of making his way. can you have a season with that again and expect not to finish on a minus 16, minus 18 goal difference, whatever it is we finished on? It's somewhere around that. I don't think you can. So again, you need to look to upgrade. I think one of the things that we did so well in that first season, and I realised we were backs against the wall, it was a different team makeup and a different shape and system, is we managed to get a few clean sheets at the end of the season and win 1-0 quite a bit. We didn't really see that. I think it was 1 clean sheet in about 6 months at Forest, maybe 2 with a Villa game. So that defence, as is, on paper, lets in goals. It genuinely just as simple as that. So again, what's the definition of madness? Doing the same thing, expecting different results. If we want to progress at the table, we do need to look to enhance those positions. So I mentioned a left back. I also mentioned a centre half. And I will say it again, if Nuno's going to stay and we're going to play 3, you're going to need 5 or 6 centre halves. And going through that list, we've got 3 or 4, but one's always injured. So, and one might be sold. So that is a position that we really do need to look to upgrade. And again, you look at the profile of the player that we want to bring in. We've got a couple of young players there, Murillo and Omadonadeli, they're both, 21, 22, assuming one or both stay. And Willy Bolly, he's the experience, but is not always available. So if we can get a player there with a bit of experience, I don't know, mid to late 20s, I'm not that precious about it, but I'm talking about the experience that he could bring to that central defence. It could be the difference between us sneaking a 1-0 or getting turned over. Because there were so many games at the back end of last season in particular where we let in late goals. And I was just screaming out just for a bit of know-how, a bit of nous, a bit of experience. But you look throughout that team, there are so many young players. So for me, my sort of closing thought on this would be, we do need to strengthen, probably with 1 or 2, regardless of whether Murillo goes, and there need to be experienced players. That's what I think.
I suppose, Pete, the thing we did in the promotion season in the January was we went out and got Felipe, who at that time was a real difference maker. And I suppose that's the kind of signing we need now, a Bolly that can play all the time. We've been linked with Morata, who's a 22-year-old who plays for Benfica. So obviously another young, talented player. But I think Mikey said, Pete, we can see 67 goals last season. It's not all on the central defenders, but it's an area where it feels like we've realistically got to strengthen to some degree, haven't we?
I think we've got to strengthen to some degree because, to use your word, realistically, Murillo's going to have to go if we're going to make these sorts of signings anyway. If he doesn't, then obviously someone else is going to go that's going to cause us very significant recruitment problems elsewhere. But as it stands, we know there's Premier League interest in Niakate, and we know that Murillo is, likely candidate number 1 to be sold to fund the work that he's doing everywhere. So there's definitely going to have to be work done. I take slight issue with some of the analysis personally about the defensive situation. I actually think that what we saw under Nuno is that we were a changing team defensively, and the stats were starting to look much better. Really, we're talking about lots of sort of crazy individual mistakes and set pieces more so than a lot of the sort of general defensive structure and the way that those defenders were playing. I think that those comments about we need to make big signings to progress up the league, I think that's actually slightly missing a trick personally. I think what we need to be doing is improving the players that we have quite often. Certainly we'll have to add, but I think we need to be working with the players that we have and improving those and working on that sort of team cohesion. And part of what lets us down as a football club is that we do too much recruitment and too much trying to improve things. And we sort of lose sight of what we've got and how we can develop. I think if you look at the Nuno reign, and if that was over the whole season, I'm pretty confident it would have been several places up the table higher than 17th. And if that's what we end up with this time next year, I think we'll all be pretty happy with that. So I'm not sure that we need massively drastic work for things to actually start picking up. And I think they already have started picking up. Having said that, I think you're bang on, Matt, about what we're probably going to have to do here. I think a player of a similar sort of profile to Bolly, that we can rely on to be fit and present, is probably the way to go to start with. If Niakate and Murillo do end up going, then we may have to look in the market for a left-sided centre half who can progress the ball a little bit, or has perhaps a little bit more athleticism if we end up with that sort of Felipe type in the other role. So it could be that we have to do a fair bit of work there. But But yeah, I think that it's just so hard to know exactly what we're going to get with Bolly. He's been absolutely fantastic when he's been fit, but clearly there are always spells of the season when he's not, and you can't really expect that to improve at this point. I wouldn't have thought. So I think we probably need to be looking at someone that can take on that mantle, I guess, for the next few years, ideally. But with every intention of Bolly playing as well and having a sort of serious role when he's available.
Yeah, you make good points there around our defensive numbers, which I'm sure Greg and Mikey will roll their eyes at again around stats. But we would think we did have the 8th best defence once Nuno came in over the course of all those games. You want to come in, Greg?
Well, no, we just pick and choose, don't we? We'll choose where we are the 8th best by saying how many games rather than say over the season. Or
well, Nuno was manager at that time.
Well, yeah, okay. Stats are good, aren't they? We can manipulate them.
Let's go through some names. But I also was going to say around set pieces, Pete's right. If we solve, and it's easier said than done, despite what Nuno says, if we solve the set piece problem, then it just makes such a huge difference. With a whole summer to work on it, you'd think we can do something to make it, 5 at least goals less conceded over a season, hopefully 10. Let's throw some names around. Jacob Greaves from Hull is mentioned repeatedly by, I think, Richard Spray, one of our members who's like a massive fan for him, who's another young promising player. Someone mentioned Tyrone Mings, I saw, but he's missed a whole, Richard Otway, he's missed a whole season of football, but he's experienced and he's left-sided. But that kind of player would be good. I think that was about it on that front. Mings. No, that was it. Oh, Connor Cody. Okay, that was a different one. Who's gone to Leicester. But that kind of player fits the bill. Joachim Anderson, the Crystal Palace one. We wouldn't get him. He'd be like 25 million, I think, wouldn't he? He's really good. He's as good as Gahey, really. So, work to do. But Pete made some good points around how good we actually are. Let's stay with Pete, see if we can make another good point. That's the challenge. Midfielders, we've got Sangare, Dominguez, Yates, and Danilo as the central four. Check Koyate Went. We've got O'Brien. We've got Mangala as it stands, but I think the expectation is he will go to Lyon ultimately. And we've got O'Brien, who will probably move. So effectively, Pete, we've really got that block of 4, Sangare, Dominguez, Yates, and Danilo. Are you sticking with the mantra there that you professed around defenders, improve what we've got then, rather than try and buy someone?
With one absolutely massive caveat, which I think you can guess what it is. Sangare obviously is the sort of striking issue in this area of the pitch. So this is such a hard question to answer. I don't want to do the whole sort of I don't know thing that I often do. But fundamentally, we need to see what happens in over the course of the summer and pre-season with Sangare. And I don't know what the plan is at the football club, whether there's a feeling internally that he can be a different player to the one we've seen so far and that he needs time to settle. And, they should have a much better grasp for that stuff than we have. They will know whether there's whether he's encountered obstacles, moving cultures and all that sort of stuff, or whether it's just a case of adapting to the pace of the league or whatever it may or may not be. They'll have a much better sense of that. Look, moving Sangare on is going to be a massive challenge, given the finances involved and the impact that they will have on us if we sell him. So the ideal situation for me is that we stick with what we've got in central midfield. I think that probably won't be very popular in the chat and may not be with my colleagues here, but I actually think that those are 4 very talented central midfielders with the option of Gibbs White dropping deep as well. Even Lewis O'Brien as one of the loan options coming back is probably the one that I'd be more tempted to, keep around for a little bit just to have a look if possible. If we're really struggling financially and we have to start making some of those decisions. But those 4, I think that's genuine Premier League quality and lots of different roles. The issue you've got is that unless Sangare is capable of fulfilling that number 6 role and allowing the others to play a little bit higher up the pitch and do their thing, we just don't have the balance there. I think Yates can fill in that deeper role. I think Danilo can fill in that deeper role. I think Dominguez can fill in that deeper role, but it's not something you want to be relying on. They're not out-and-out ball winners. I don't think they're players that are going to give that sort of the central defensive area an awful lot of cover in a sort of consistent sense. I think the way Mark often talks about it is that the sort of discipline of the role. We really need someone in there who you can feel real confidence in. hugely hope that man can be Sangare and this can be a sort of transformative summer for him. Because if it is, it'll be a transformative summer for us, because I think the quality in that central midfield area is of a level that most teams in the Premier League would be pretty interested in. Personally, I think there's an awful lot of quality there. You work with those players, I think there's massive improvement. I mean, if you think about the role that Dominguez played in the second half of the season, it was pretty minimal, really. But I couldn't be much more confident that he's a seriously talented footballer who can have a major impact to this football club if he stays. So there is real room for improvement and for growth there. And I don't want to be like sort of endlessly puritanical about my desire to keep developing players, but I am a bit of a puritan for that. That I do think that's important, and I think that there's an awful lot of talent in that area, and I think we should try and work with it.
I think Sangare, Mikey, is probably the pivotal one of the whole summer. And like Pete says, I think the club will know what they're going to do with him. At least say we're going to give him pre-season, we're going to sell now. Steve-O mentions Yates in the comments. I mean, they could sell him for PSR profitability. It'd really help. He's only got 1 year left in his contract, so his market value is minimal. So there's not a lot you can do in that area of the pitch, is there, unless you sell Sangare, and that's the big decision, really.
It all hinges around him. Honestly, it really does. So he's a record signing. My dad watches him and says that he's seen enough to know already that he ain't going to cut it. And I think that is a view that's shared with a lot of people in the comments, a lot of people I spoke to. It's not my view. I genuinely concur a little bit with the guys when you say, here's a player that's come over. He's already played at a decent level. He will take time to settle in. He had AFCON. He had injuries. He was in a struggling team that kept changing its formation, sacked its manager. So there are mitigating circumstances where perhaps why he hasn't settled as quickly. But this pre-season is crucial to define what we do, because games for me are won and lost in the centre of the park. That's what cheese is, but it's true. It's won and lost in the centre of the park. And if we have somebody in there, as Pete said, is disciplined, that knows the role, that's fit, that's up to speed with the game and can pop a pass off, my word, that just gives us so many options with formation, with the fact that we therefore then don't have to try and recoup losses and then try and replace him. I just think it's pivotal. So I've got my fingers crossed that he has a cracking pre-season, looks sharp, enjoys what he's doing, gets in that team, because I can remember at West Ham away, him and Dominguez ran that game for 60 minutes. So it is there. And those two, I think, maybe are our first choice. So for me, you've just got to hope and pray that he starts off on fire. And if not, then we have a very big decision to make. Do we persevere with him, or do we try and recoup some losses and therefore try and upgrade in the middle of the park? The point about Gibbs White dropping deeper as well. If we go to a 5, you saw that quite a bit, didn't you? So he drops deeper next to Yates, then you have the two wingers and Chris Wood or whoever up front. I can see us doing that quite a lot, but I want us to do it on the front foot rather than a need and a necessity to do it because our record signing ain't up to it. And I think that's probably the crux of the matter. So I shall be watching. Everyone panics about pre-season, right? But I shall be watching Sangare to see what he looks like and whether I think he can do it. And then let's say if he gets in that team and gives us so many options and we think, do you know what? He is the guy that we signed and he is capable of dictating the match. And therefore, any funds that we have can be spent in these other areas. I think it's absolutely crucial, Matt. The most crucial position for me.
Yeah, I agree. Games really are won and lost in that area. Like Neil says here, and this is Lewis's point, that consistently we need a player who will take the ball, be technically good, and dictate games. And that's Gibbs White. But you don't want him to drop deep necessarily, because it takes so much away from the team unless you're reshaping the formation and everything. Just quickly before we move on to wingers and forwards, what about Danilo, Greg? We haven't mentioned him. I think he's only 22 still. He's got so much potential. He's just if he can iron out the inconsistencies in his game, and it's a big if, then he could be a real player next season. But he needs to make some pretty big, consistent strides, I guess, doesn't he?
He's shown the natural ability. He's got that talent, and he can have brilliant spells. And concentration and inconsistency, things like that, they can be taught. When you've got the natural ability with the right people around him, then he'll just improve. So you stick with Danilo. He's got so much potential. He's had some very, very good moments in these couple of this season, and he'll improve. So give him time, give him a good pre-season as well, and another summer of learning and getting fitter. He'll probably get a bit stronger put a bit more muscle on, and then see how he is at the start of this season. Just players like that benefit from settled, proper pre-seasons, just like Sangari. If we're talking about using him next season, that's the key. Pre-season, so I just hope it's a good one. I hope we've got plenty of games and plenty of time to look at these players, because it would be very nice to be able to use these ones we've already got in those areas, because Sangari, for one's proven he's a top player in other clubs, and Danilo's just young, exciting, everything you want from a player, really.
Clock's ticking. We've still got a fair chunk of the team to do, the forwards. So I'll put this graphic back up, Pete. We've always said consistently the attacking quartet is our best area of the team. But when you look at the depth chart there, Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, Elanga, fantastic. Then the backup to them, as it stands, is probably Dennis, Bowler and Aguilera. So you can't really risk going a season with them, with Callum's injury record. So you've got to do something there. And we've got a limited budget, I imagine. So it's the recruitment team. I just think one of the things I want to emphasize from this is the recruitment team's got a hell of a challenge this summer if we haven't got too much money, depending on who we sell, because we need to add quality to really compete in those areas. Really, that's another key area, I think.
I personally think this might be the key area, actually, having thought about it for a little while now. I think we have, as you say, we've talked before about that sort of the attacking three behind the striker being our real sort of area of strength, and we're potentially hurting teams and something that we should be building around and often have done. But the drop-off is just extraordinary. And obviously we've lost loan options that have come in and sort of tried to make an impact in those areas off the bench, but generally have failed to do so. I think we've seen, haven't we, that players coming off the bench have just not been able to change games for us. And when they've started, they've not been able to have an impact either. Both Origi and, in this sort of fairly small opportunities, Reina just didn't really seem to be able to make a significant impact in those areas. And I think, I mean, I haven't really looked back over the season at all, but it did feel like there was an awful lot of occasions where Nuno was looking to his bench, or perhaps Cooper was earlier in the season, and we really needed something to happen. Perhaps Elanga and Hudson-Odoi had been carrying knocks or whatever, and weren't going to be able to complete whole games. And there's just nothing to come on and have an impact to carry us over a line or to stretch the defence and keep having a threat and that sort of thing. I do feel quite strongly this might be the area that we most need to look at. And I think perhaps interestingly, it's probably an opportunity for us to try and cover a couple of positions at the same time with a couple of additions here. I think we might need to be looking, if finances are as tight as we think they're going to be, we might need to be looking for perhaps someone who can fill in up front and one of the wide positions, or the number 10, and someone who can do two of the other roles. I guess there's 4 roles there, and we may need flexible players who can perform at least a couple of them. I think generally that's quite often the case in this sort of modern football. You see wide players are relatively comfortable on both flanks and often happy drifting into sort of number 10 areas. So hopefully it's something that we can do. I'm not sure exactly how easy it's going to be to upgrade those areas for the first team. I mean, Elanga had a storming first half of the season, and Hudson-Odoi had a storming second half of the season, I guess, to put it crudely. So you'd be pretty happy, I think, about those two going forward. But I do think we need at least somebody of a similar level to try and compete and drive that and give us an option off the bench as well. Because I mean, in particular, Elanga, you just imagine him coming off the bench and being able to cause absolute devastation and carnage amongst tired defences. So that's the way I'd be looking to go, and I think I hope the scouting team are able to unearth a couple of gems who can perhaps play in a couple of roles. And I think, given the finances and the fact that we know Nuno wants a tighter squad, a bit of versatility might be the way to go forwards there.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good point. Because like Reina, Greg, I know you're a big fan of his, but that kind of player isn't going to want to play second fiddle. And he did play second fiddle all season, really, because we had that established group. He's not going to come back, is he? So it probably does need to be a young gem that we have to unearth from Brazil or somewhere like that, rather than pay $100,000 a week for another Origi, I think.
It does sound like Nuno was petrified of losing Gibbs-White through injury, so they had to get a player that could do that role. So you wonder whether Reina did understand what he was coming into. He's certainly going to be a player that Dortmund are going to be looking to move on, that's for sure. But yeah, it's a tough position. These players like that, they want to play. But I do think we need someone, because you lose a Gibbs White for a few months and it really does affect your season, doesn't it? So, like you said, the the recruitment team have got a heavy few months ahead of them, or weeks even. It's not even that long, is it?
True. Let's look at some names that have been dropped in. Gary says Ritsu Doan from Freiburg. I don't know. You hipster boys will know more.
I keep having to Google him. I'm now a massive fan of that goalkeeper called Andrew. He looks about 14, but he's had some good stats.
Odegaard at Burnley, who did brilliantly in the Championship, but didn't do much at all in the Premier League. But then, difficult one. What have we got here? Daniel Podence would make sense. Nicholas Pepe. If that's Mason Greenwood, then absolutely not for me.
Dear me.
No, we don't need that. We haven't. No way. No. The thing is, we're starting to get this kind of identity with the pace, aren't we? I think we use the pace so well. So you hope that we're finding that identity and going for players that we are going to be utilised in that kind of area and be used to that. So it'll be interesting.
A couple of others. Callum O'Hare from Cov, good player. Back to his best as a number 10. That would be a proper Gibbs White cover, which would make sense. Gus Hamer did quite well. Carby, he's the Olympiacos one, isn't he? Who is he more of a forward? I don't know. Oh, this is a good one. Gabriel Sara had a good season in the Championship for Norwich. I think he's on a free. And Ben Brereton, we discussed quite a lot at length. And he is that versatile player who can play out wide or up front. So just before we finish, up front then, Mikey, we've got Wood, we've got Awoniyi. We've consistently said, or people on here consistently said, we need another. I was thinking about it though. Almost every club in the Premier League actually only has two strikers, like big clubs and smaller clubs, like City. I've written down Haaland and Alvarez, Liverpool, Darwin and Gakpo, Villa, Watkins and Duran. And then you go lower down the table, Brentford have got Tony and Visser for now. Palace have got Edouard and Mateta. So are we going to be carrying three strikers? Some clubs do it. Arsenal have got Havertz, Jesus and Nketiah if you count Havertz as a striker. But are we going to be investing that much money into three strikers when we've got two experienced ones? Or is it more the problem that the two we've got are slightly injury prone or past their best years?
Yeah, I shall answer that and shoehorn my other point in that I wanted to make on the other thing. So the reason they have it, Matt, is because the players behind them and even the midfielders get 10 goals. Like each of them throughout the season, we don't necessarily have that. I mean, you look at our central midfield, Domingos, Yates, Sangare, Danilo, how many goals did they get between them? 3, 4, 5? Whereas those teams you mentioned, they score from all over the pitch. And they're 2 or 3 and behind their top one gets 10, 15 goals. Whereas, Alanga had a good start to the season, faded off. Callum got a few at the end of the season, and Gibbs White probably should have got more goals. So that's why they can afford to only have two strikers, because they've got goals throughout the team. So I think for us, can I just go back slightly before I answer your question? The wingers, I think, are key, and I think the guys are right. I just hope we're not snobbish. And by that, I mean, there are some really good players in the Championship, and you just touched on one from Norwich, Sara. I wrote down here, Jack Clarke at Sunderland. Yeah. Really, every time I watch them, he's by far the best player on that pitch. So he's a young English guy who can come in, who knows about the culture and can hit the ground running. You've also got teams that missed out on promotion. I know Somerville might be a bit of a wish list, but there are players in that league that could come in and wouldn't cost as much as people think. And again, cast your mind back to the people that have come up in recent seasons, not for us. So Elise for Palace, Eze for Palace, Jared Bowen for West Ham a few seasons before. There were some absolutely brilliant players in that league, which is genuinely regarded as the 5th toughest league in Europe. So I just hope we're not snobbish and don't think, actually, we got out of the Championship, we're not looking at that, we have to go to Europe or South America. We don't. There are some good players on these shores right now that, we just spoke about Sangare having to settle in, and some of the players we get from abroad, like the fullbacks we bought in, didn't settle. Well, you wouldn't necessarily have that problem if somebody's already playing in this country. That's kind of all I'm saying on that. But back to your strikers, you've got a problem there, because Taiwo, when he's fit, is a monster and people can't handle him. But he's struggled in recent seasons. And Chris Wood, I think, has had an absolutely storm over the last 3 months. Is it right to expect that again next season? I'm not sure it is. So I think we probably have to go with 3 strikers because, like I said, we don't have the backup in the positions behind them to guarantee those goals. And when we didn't have a striker, can you remember we went to Liverpool and played Elanga up front, barely got out our own half? Like if Taiwo goes down again and Chris Wood, for whatever reason, can't play or can't function for the 90 minutes, we're going to struggle to score a goal. So I think we absolutely do need to. So for me, if I'm doing a quick wish list, it's a fullback, it's sort out that midfield, whatever it needs, and get a striker in. I think it's crucial.
Another name as well that is really good that I had forgotten about because he missed quite a lot of games the second half of the season is Jonathan Rowe from Norwich. I don't know if people have seen much of him. He's very talented. Yeah. Do you want to come in, Greg? There.
I just thought you were going to say Dennis.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, Dennis is the other one. Do you just keep Dennis as your fourth winger? He's on a lot of money.
I don't think so. I think you hope a Watford or someone go in for him. Sorry, it was just that made me smile.
I did write down Dennis's season stats. They weren't amazing. He did I not write? Oh yeah, 26 games last season. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He is 26 years old, so he's in his prime in theory. 26 games, 4 goals last season over the whole course, 0 assists. Those 4 goals all came in 17 games for Watford, effectively in the Championship. So I don't know if his star's fading or if he needs a rejig, but I would say probably want to move on. Just before I throw it to Pete as well, a couple of names. Tammy Abraham was mentioned, Adebayo from Luton, another one from Carlton Morris from Luton, Evan Ferguson. I don't know. I can't see them selling him. Oh, he's fantastic. Just been a bit injured. That's about it generally. Right, Pete, any thoughts on strikers before we move on to conclusions?
I think actually, just before I answer that, there's a really good shout, I think, personally, in the comments for Ogbeni from Luton, who I think would be a really, really good natural fit for the way that Nuno's had us playing in those wide roles. His statistical profile is like absolutely ideal, absolutely rapid, carries the ball so well, beats a man. I think he could be a really good competition in those wide areas for us. Seems to be a pretty versatile player as well. So I think that's a good shout. Can't remember who said that, but great shout. Strikers wise, I think this is the most difficult job we've got to do because it's just so hard to work out what sort of level of striker is feasible with the budget we've got. But also we've got 2 players who are either in the prime or sort of perhaps leaving the prime, but certainly still playing at a high level and with a very good wage attached and all that sort of stuff. And the competition for number 9s in the Premier League is extraordinary as well. I mean, we ended up with a brilliant one in Taiwo, but through fantastic scouting and being ahead of the curve on going for him. But clearly, there's an issue there in his fitness. I think if there's any sense that Taiwo's injury worries could be behind him with the surgery he's had and such like, then I think we definitely don't need a number 9. But the chances of that seem pretty slim. He's got a few years in a row now of picking up these sorts of injuries and being out for real spells. The problem we've got though is, can you see either of those 2 players being in a Forest squad as third choice striker? Can we afford to do that? I'm not sure if that's really feasible. As things stand, I sort of wonder if we need to go out and get a number 9, then whether one of them has to go. Whether you can do that business is difficult because obviously Taiwo's not got a great record in terms of the amount of games he's been able to play recently. And Chris Wood's at a fairly sort of advanced stage of his career and is earning an awful lot of money here and has had his contract extended and has also been brilliant, and I wouldn't be desperate to part with him. I think it's a really, really difficult one, and I'm not totally sure what the answer to that is. I think that it's one of the positions that's going to have to be decided by ultimately what we've got to spend when we've done business out in terms of outgoings and then trying to prioritise things. It feels like a worry going into a season with those 2, with the potential for them to not be fit for periods of the season and for us to then be ending up playing Elanga or Gibbs-White in that number 9 role. But while that's true, I think the alternative is true, that it's going to be very difficult to recruit someone better than them in the competitive market that we've got for the sort of money that we've got. So I don't really know how to square that circle. I think the only way to do it probably is with really, really smart recruitment. And I hope that George Sorianos has been busy at his laptop and has got something lined up for us. So yeah, I hope that's the case. But I think it's a really difficult one because you're talking about so much context here in terms of squad dynamics and finances, and there's an awful lot at play. I don't think it's an easy question to answer at all. And I mean, also half of the names that are being mentioned in the comments sound brilliant, but there's no way that Forest can be forking out £50 million for a striker who's on 150 grand a week. It's just, if you've seen the way the financial rules are going in the Premier League, it's only going to go one way for us, and that's getting harder. It's not going to get easier from here. The rules are getting tighter, and we've got no way. Forget all the stuff about what happens with the City ground or moving elsewhere or whatever. We've currently got no way of changing our commercial income in a very significant way for that to happen, for our circumstances to change significantly. So it's going to be very, very tight, and I think maybe our expectations need to be managed a little bit here. Personally, that's why I think underpinning everything that we do should be bringing in young players with talent, developing them, making them better, and then seeing where we go from there, whether we look to sell them or we build teams around them. I think that's the only way that we can compete, regardless of whether we talk about massive campuses elsewhere or whatever. I think it's all pie in the sky stuff. Forest have to be a club that is run really smoothly with a massive focus on recruiting sensibly and cleverly. And I think that's the only way we can go. And there are signs that we can do that. In amongst the signs that we can get a bit confused and muddled and then end up doing too much, there have been plenty of signs that we can do that, and we can pick players that other teams have perhaps not quite gone for. There's loads of those signs in the current squad, so I'm sort of hopeful that we can do that. But the primary objective is going to have to be keeping wages down. We can't afford to be signing players on big contracts from other Premier League clubs and such like, because the wages absolutely kill you under the current financial structures. There's just no way we can do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. Like, some of that model's in place already with Murillo and Hudson-Odoi and players we can sell on. Cut out the Origi signing that does nothing for us, and then we'll be in a much better place. Sign the odd big money player for the 20 million man that becomes a 50 million pound man, and then the Bolly type experienced player. The trouble is, I suppose you have to almost nail the percentage of signings has to be really, really high that you nail with the new rules. You can't get away with getting 50% right, 60% right. You probably need to get like 80% right, and that's so hard to do. And not many teams do that at all in the Premier League. And I think we did pretty well last season with, say, we got 60% of our signings right. But we're going to have to be even better, significantly better in years to come. Just a couple more. Where's it gone? Someone mentioned Alfie Doughty, which would be quite funny just to take all Luton's best players, just to really piss them off, because he does take a good free kick, but I just don't think he can defend. So he wouldn't necessarily be for me. But I know Palace and Brentford were injured. Oh, that's the garage ringing about my wife's car to bankrupt me. Pick that up later. Right. Greg, just quickly.
Maybe it's a good time to ask people to become members, Matt, in case you get a big bill.
Yeah, if someone could do a super chat for about 1,500 quid or a new car, that'd be really helpful. Right, Greg, just a quick one out of curiosity. Season starts tomorrow. Both of them are fit. Chris Wood or Awoniyi, who would start, do you think, for you?
Taiwo. I was just looking, he's played 47 Premier League games in 2 seasons. That's barely over half, is it? I don't think we can just say he's going to be injured next season. He's going to be coming into the new season fit as it ended. He was playing again. He was getting some minutes. Trust our team behind the scenes to keep him fit and healthy, and they'll know the issues. They'll know why he got injured previously. It doesn't mean he's going to get injured again. For me, Taiwo is the man. He's the most dangerous striker we've got. He just hasn't been able to stay fit these past 2 seasons. So I don't think we go all out and spend the precious little money we do have in this next transfer window. I think we take a risk and look elsewhere and go for something young potential that just might work, like we have found before with Murillo and Danilo and players like that. Trust what we've got at the minute. They both score goals, and we will sign something young and exciting. I'm certain of that.
Russell says about being smart in the loan market, picking off fringe players from the big 6, and Nketiah, Smith Rowe. Those are the kind of loan signings I would probably be on board with, but then you're never going to sign them at the end of it. They're just going to go to someone else. So that's kind of where we miss out. We're just improving the big 6 players when they already have all the money. So that just helps them even more, which would be frustrating, but it does make some sense. Right. We do have a second sponsor for this episode just before we wrap up. Thanks to Mike Boynes, who you know well, Mikey, who set this one up for us for Global Telemetrics. You don't know what they are? Don't worry. I've got the answer of what they do here. They are an award-winning vehicle tracking company who are responsible for the recovery of £39.4 million worth of stolen vehicles in 2023. They monitor a range of smart track Thatcham-approved devices to fit customers' needs, from plant machinery to everyday cars and supercars. And then talking about everyday cars, the most stolen car in 2023 was the Ford Fiesta. So if you are on a budget and drive a car like that and you don't want to get nicked, then Global Telemetrics are the people for you. So thank you very much for their support. Good to have another new sponsor on board. The link to their website is in the episode description. Right. The point of the exercise was to work out how many players we need and how difficult it's going to be to get it right. And I think we've covered the difficult to get it right part, as in very. So I think roughly, and the chaps can disagree with me, we probably need 2 keepers, a fullback, at least 1 central defender, so that's 4, maybe a central midfielder, that's 5, a backup number 10, at least a winger, 6, 7, maybe a striker, 8, a couple around the edges. We probably need about 10 signings. So who knows how many we're going to end up with. Mikey, any further thoughts on that? I can see the other 2 are writing notes and being very diligent. So, Mikey, any thoughts on how many we need?
How many we need and how many we get are 2 different, very different things. I think that's about right, because I think if you look at the graphic that you put up for those watching, the depth underneath that starting 11 is very flaky. Probably being kind. So even if it's just to pad out the bench, give us options, allow us to be fluid in changing formations over a very long and hard season. Bearing in mind, we are going to have to sell a few, and that will happen, and they will be some of our best players. I think you're going to need 8 to 10. 8 to 10 is what I wrote down. Now, whether we get that is a different thing. But I think the loan market as well, actually, just one more thing, is very key, and I mentioned it at the start. You know, if everybody just thinks, literally go back each season, we've always had 3 or 4 really key loan players that have been in the first team. And I don't see why this season will be any different. So even if it's 3 or 4 or 5 permanent additions, I think that will be topped up with a few key loanees. And I think that could make sure we're okay. But it should be a very interesting pre-season.
Yeah, I think so. Good point about loans. This season's loans were a bit of a dud, weren't they? But the season before, we had Navas and Loddy. Who else did we have on loan who was pretty... Oh, Dean Henderson. So, yeah, I think we did a really good job. So if we can get season 1, not season 2 loans, then that's right. And the 8 players I mentioned, that was assuming that people aren't old, like Murillo and Gibbs-White, and I suspect one of them will be. So, yeah, something like 8 to 10, probably 10 for me. What about you, Greg?
I've wrote down 6 because I just think... Goalkeeper, fullback, 2 centre-backs, a midfielder and a striker. And it's still a lot. It's still more than these established Premier League sides do. We really need to start being more careful with the recruitment and trusting the ones we buy rather than doing what we've done the last few seasons and just chuck it all out there. So I think there'll be less than we expect or are used to this season. And I hope there are less of them as well, because it means we're not replacing our best players because they've stayed. And I think that's the biggest key for me, keeping them. But yeah, 6 would be a nice number.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I'm thinking like 8 with someone probably going who isn't like Gibbs-White or Murillo. So yeah, 8, something around that for me. Pete, final one for you.
I've got 5. I've got 5 written down without sales of first team players. If we assume that more go, then I think that number has to change. But I'm really, really wary about doing an awful lot more than that.
What are your 5? What positions are the 5?
Centre back, full back, and then 3 potentially versatile players. So I've got sort of winger, 10, striker loosely there, but I'm hoping that they're players who can be flexible across the forward line.
So you have a keeper as well then, but not.
I'm having a keeper if Turner goes, and if we can do that business. But that's my next priority after after those ones. I just think this is an awful lot of recruitment to be doing, and recruitment is expensive in a situation where we already need to sell players just to pass the rules for this current period, and in the next period, certainly the period after the next period, things are getting a lot tighter, and I'm sort of slightly concerned about how this actually works in practice unless we can sell a footballer for £80 million every year, which is far from guaranteed, even though we've got 2 or 3 in the squad who might get us somewhere up near those areas with good form and without injuries and such like. I think we need to keep it a much tighter squad. I think we need to have much less change at the City Ground, and I think we need to start investing in what we've got rather than just spraying cash around all over the place and filling other people's benches and stands with rubbish players that we don't want and they don't end up wanting either. I think it's a really toxic vibe to be bringing in the amount of players that we have done, and it's almost impossible for managers like Cooper or Nuno to turn that around. We've seen how hard these Premier League seasons have been, partly because we've had massive flux and no time for players to get used to each other, and partly because the atmosphere away from the pitch can't be great when you've got the resulting impacts of FFP and all that sort of stuff looming over you, and we just really need to avoid all that stuff. I think I'm really hoping for a much quieter, much more precise summer, and personally I'll be starting to get worried if we're going into double figures again, because I just think it's too hard for managers to turn that around and develop what you've got and build on it and progress. I think we'll end up being in the same situation again next season, saying exactly the same things that we have been doing for the last few months.
Yeah, I think my number's slightly higher than you because of benches. Like, if you look at the games are longer now. I don't know what they'll do this year around time added on, but the depth of the bench feels like it needs to be of a good quality. And some of the positions we put up on that graphic, there was very little depth. So my number's slightly higher than yours, but I can see the rationale. And I wouldn't want to go mad. Something like you're saying 6, I'm saying 8, something like that. Overall.
Just one other thing as well. I think I know we've talked a lot recently about it perhaps being a very difficult step up for players from the academy and such like, given that we're a Premier League club now. But I think that we really need to bake that in as part of what we do. And it doesn't need to be a bench that has 9 starting 11 challenging players in there. I think we have to try and get that pathway continuing as well. And if it means having a couple of lads on there who we can work with, involve in the first team squad, develop them, really give them a sense that there's a sort of a real path for progress for them there. I think that's something that we should do as well. It's something that we've always been proud of. And just because we're a Premier League team now, it doesn't mean that you can't do that anymore. There's still good staff at the academy. It is being invested in pretty heavily. Hopefully that'll increase with new infrastructure and new facilities in the nearest future. But I think that's something that we have to be open to as well. And I don't want us as a fan base to get blinded by being in the Premier League and there being massive name players all over the place. I think we can stick to some of those bits of ethos as well and have a tighter squad with a real pathway, hopefully for 1 or 2 to try and get involved each year. And it doesn't mean that we're going to have a Worrell or a Yates coming in or a Brennan Johnson and playing 40 games in the Premier League. Obviously, that's a huge ask. But I think the sense that pathway is available and that there aren't 10 players who aren't even in the match day squad ahead of them as well is a really vital part of what this club should be. Yeah, and you're right. The club have invested a lot in the academy. They've got a huge staff base and they're putting a lot into it and they're developing young people really well there. So there needs to be an opportunity for them. And I do love something like away from Forest on Match of the Day when you see a player you've never heard of on the team, like Brighton, just randomly turning up with Hinshelwood went on and played some games. There were some completely random names at the end of the season. And I do enjoy that from football. Right, we've done an hour and 10 minutes. We're almost on some kind of record here. And we've only just scratched the surface, really. We've opened up another topic there. But any final thoughts, any other business, Greg Mitchell?
No, I was about to file for overtime then. Over an hour. God.
Up the rate from 0 to 0, yeah.
No, it's just, I hope we get a good pre-season. I hope we get to go somewhere nice. It was brilliant last year in Frankfurt. So, no, just buy your Forza Fest tickets, please. Come and see us. Come and have a laugh. Come and listen to some good music. I'm looking forward to the next live show as well, because I'm hoping Pete's going to bring one of those guitars if they're even real.
They're just pictures, pal.
Yeah, it's one of those CGI green screen backgrounds that Pete's done to just look like his living room. That's how clever he is. Right, just before I throw it to Pete and mention the live show myself, if you haven't already, do us a favour, hit like on this video. It certainly helps spread the word. And great to have 455 people with us this far into the show, so appreciate that. And do subscribe if you haven't already. Mikey, anything from you before we go?
Just to say, Pete's point about the pathway for academy kids, I think is really valid, and I think it's what should set us apart, and we should be proud of it. Obviously, these guys need to be of a standard, but sometimes you don't know that unless you give somebody a chance. So you can only do 5 subs, you can name 9. And I'm with you, Matt. I love it seeing some of these players from other teams I've never heard of, and you look and they're 18 and they've been on loan somewhere else and they're getting a chance. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. And if our bench is made up of a Joe Gardner or a Powell or a few others next season, then brilliant. I'll be fully supporting
that. Pete, anything from you before we depart?
Just very quickly, just to associate myself with Greg's really beautiful comments at the start of the podcast. I think it's obviously incredibly sad news, and it's quite amazing. I think how many people Rob's passing has sort of impacted and touched, and I suppose that says an awful lot about what he and others are doing for that really important cause. And I guess there's nothing else really any of us can hope for in this sort of fairly short life, but to leave a bit of a legacy. And Rob has done that in the most unbelievable way. And I think Sam and Greg and all of the guys involved in what they're doing will do exactly the same thing. And I hope that one day soon we get an answer to this really cruel disease.
Bloody hell, Pete. I should always leave you till last, because now I've got some kind of cynical stuff to vlog. Right. Greg, did you want to come in there or not? You look like you were just
not at all. It's just like appreciate those words, and it just shows how it really has affected a lot of people, yesterday's news. But yeah, those words were brilliant, so thank you. Anyway, on to you trying to flog something.
Yeah. Here's some cynical rubbish words for you. Buy some tickets to our live show in 10 days' time. It's next Thursday. You can get the tickets in the link for the description for this episode. Lewis is there, Gary's there, Greg will be on stage. Not sure who else will join him. Pete might come along with his guitar. We're up against Girls Aloud, apparently, which I didn't realise. I saw Mikey on Twitter making some outrageous suggestion that we'll sing a Girls Aloud song in compensation, which is absolutely not going to happen unless Mikey wants to do it, or Pete with wants to sing Sound of the Underground or something.
Yeah, we can get Sound of the Underground learned in time easy. So it's a belter. It's a tune.
It is a great song. It's a great song.
Laura's decided Girls Aloud, by the way, instead of the podcast. So,
has she?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, God.
Name and shame.
A bit sad then when she mentioned that. Like gutted.
Yeah. I know.
Oh, okay. No,
it's because I'm on. I think if I wasn't on, she'd have gone,
yeah. That's true. All right, I'll let her off then. That's fine. Yeah, no problem. Happy birthday to Temple Jr., Evan Temple, age, oh God, 3, 2, does anyone know? Happy birthday, Evan, anyway. I know that's why Temps isn't here today. He's gone off to the safari park or something for a family day out. But yeah, happy birthday to Temple Jr. Right. Great to have so many people with us. We shall be back on certainly Wednesday, hopefully Thursday, probably Friday. Don't really know. It's all very freewheeling, but we'll do our best to keep you entertained with some amateurish nonsense where the host stumbles over his words repeatedly. Greg Mitchell, thank you very much.
I enjoyed that. Thank you. I can't believe we managed to talk for so long about no football each week. So let's see.
Yeah, that's the trick. That's the illusion that we try and pull for the next few weeks. Right, Mikey Clarke, thank you very much.
Pleasure. You wait till all the transfers start coming in. Blimey, it's going to be great.
I know. All the rumours. It'll be non-stop when it all kicks off. Probably next month, I guess. Now, once all the FFP stuff is sorted. Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Thanks, absolute pleasure. And just quickly for anyone involved in the football club who says I'm negative all the time, I did praise the academy investment, so just watch out for that and clip that one.
I don't think anyone within the football club has said you're negative. Certainly not to me. Right. We'll leave it there. Have a good day, everyone. We shall be back soon, like I said. But in the meantime, we shall see you soon.